Welcome to the People of AI podcast, showcasing inspiring people with interesting stories in the field of artificial intelligence. I'm Ashley Oldacre. Let's jump right in. This podcast is sponsored by Google. Any remarks made by the speakers are their own and are not endorsed by Google. Hello everyone, Ashley here. Welcome to a Google I/O special for the People of AI podcast. Google I/O 2024 took place this past May with exciting announcements and updates to Google products and features. No surprises, AI was a top topic this year. And with us today, I'm thrilled to be talking with two very important and very special guests that will be talking about the exciting AI launches that took place this year at Google I/O. So welcome, Mat and Logan.
Thank you.
How's it going?
So Mat Velloso is the Vice President for Machine Learning Developer Products at Google. He joined us from Microsoft, where he spent 15 years working with all kinds of developers in a variety of different roles, ranging from consulting to developer relations, building frameworks, and leading development teams. In his most recent roles at Microsoft, Mat was the technical advisor to the Chief Technology Officer for nearly 2 years and technical advisor to the Chief Executive Officer for another 4. Outside of work, Mat plays the piano and enjoys riding motorcycles.
Guilty.
Logan Kilpatrick is the product lead for Google's AI Studio, a fast and simple entry platform to start building with Gemini, Google's next-generation multimodal generative AI model. Before that, he led developer relations at OpenAI and was previously an applied machine learning engineer and software engineer at Apple and NASA. In his spare time, Logan was the community manager for the Julia programming language and is an avid ambassador of artificial general intelligence. Welcome, Mat and Logan. We're thrilled to have you. As this podcast is about the people of AI, I would love us to tell us a little bit about yourselves, and we'll start with you, Mat. Go as far back as you would like and share whatever you feel comfortable.
So I'm originally from Brazil, and I started programming computers when I was 9. I'm now 47, so you can do the math. Very clearly, that's what I wanted to work with. I was really, really excited about what software, what programming tools can create in terms of economic value. Like one of my heroes is this guy named Anders Hausberg. He created Turbo Pascal, Delphi, TypeScript. Like everything he touches turns into gold. So I keep thinking how many jobs he created, right? Just by doing these things, my entire career. So that got me really excited to get into this space and creating the tools that help, unlocking this power and solve problems for everyone.
Was there a moment in particular that sort of opened your eyes more tangibly, where a lot of our guests talk about the first time they had a computer or someone, you were talking about someone that you admire. What was sort of a moment, take us to that moment where you sort of started putting things together and it became obvious to you that technology was sort of a force for impact?
My first job as a software developer, we built 2 systems. One that could look at blood tests, images of blood tests, and analyze the results and kind of tell you, anything from blood type and this kind of things. And the other system was a system for legal offices to write standard legal documents in Brazilian Portuguese. And back then, there was no AI. It's just a lot of ifs and thens and else's and, do this. If you don't find this, do that, right? And
programming,
right,
tedious
really
programming, yeah.
Very tedious. And so it's wonderful to now be at the point where I revisit these things I've done and say, God, how many more things I could have done if I had the technologies that are available now, right? So I think I had many examples of those where, building software for safety, that could thinking wow, this thing could save somebody's life in a big mining company, depending on what happens, right? So there's so many cases like that where I felt gosh, I love that I chose this as a career.
Thank you for sharing. Logan, how about you take us way back?
First of all, Mat, I love that. I feel like my story is very, very different. I think the moment that computer science clicked for me was when I heard about Flappy Bird, and I had heard that some guy was making this app that was going viral across. And I feel like it was one of the first at least in my life, like the first like viral thing that a developer had built. And the story was like centered on the like actual developer, not like, a lot of other things are around like, the company or the product. But this was like, this human, this single individual guy who went and built this thing. And I was like, wow, that's crazy that he built something that touched so many people's lives. And
what was it?
Flappy Bird, the little
Flappy Bird.
game where the like pipes show up and you have the bird is trying to go through the pipes and you're like tapping on the screen.
Oh, I never really.
You've got to.
Okay. Oh no, now I'm gonna be addicted. Okay.
It's beauty because it's such a simple, like technically it's a very simple game, but like it really exploded. Everybody was talking about it.
Everyone was talking about it, and it exploded so much that it actually, the developer like pulled it off of the App Store, which is like what kind of led to this, him becoming legendary. It was so popular, it was so beyond what he had ever imagined. He was overwhelmed and removed it, and that got me excited about building things. And I ultimately this was while I was in high school, tried to start learning to code myself, and watched a bunch of videos and had a horrible time. And fast forward to college when I was actually learning how to code and working part-time at the Apple Store. And this combination of learning to code at the same time that I was like helping people solve their real tangible problems. I think there was like some, reinforcement learning with human feedback loop that was happening in my brain, where it was like the intersection of helping people and the intersection of coding really just stuck with me. And I think like that's what gets me excited today, is like, how can we help developers like build things? And ultimately it's like developers who are changing the world and creating all the cool things that we all get to benefit from and talk about it at Google I/O and stuff like that. So I just have that like deeply rooted empathy for people who are building stuff now, especially as someone who like, making computers and programming them at 9. I was like, that was not me, who I was. Like, I just always struggled with coding and computer science. And like, I think that just amplifies the desire to want to make things easy for developers, and like feeling the pain that people feel as they try to build stuff, I think is a real driving force for me today.
Thanks for sharing. Both of you have this theme of and this desire to bridge tech to sort of make people's lives better. Can you tell or share about a moment where like technology made your life better?
I already gave my age away, right? So I can talk about when we first got a modem. And because until then, like, learning how to program, like when I was 9, 10, like I had this tiny little computer, a whole bunch of books, and that was it. Like your answer had to be in those books. There's no, let me search somewhere, right?
Let me ask Gemini.
Right, let me ask Gemini. I was like, as a kid, God, how many times I got super frustrated, right? I couldn't solve a problem. And I have a brother, he's 10 years older than me, and he's a software developer as well. And we lived in different cities. So like I would call him crying because my program wouldn't work, and he would try to help me on the phone, right? Like that was it. Like that was your tech help desk, right? So then one day we got a modem, and, could connect that thing, plug into the phone line, and suddenly there was all these other people, because it wasn't such a common thing. Like you didn't have, like my neighbors, the other kids, they didn't have computers. Like it was sort of a unique thing. And suddenly that door opened, and I found a whole bunch of kids who were also into this stuff. Like, oh, wow, there are other kids like me who like this stuff. That's amazing. And I think that was one big wow moment to realize, okay, there are a whole bunch of people who are excited. They're watching this space being born and grow very quickly and having questions and exploring. And now we have a way of connecting with each other. And I think that was very unique.
Now I see why you care so much about sort of the developer and the community, right? Because you found your own through a community and giving you that access and that growth and to share with other people. Yeah. So, thank you. And what about you, Logan?
I think the one that stands out to me most is the recent AI explosion, specifically again for developers. Like I just feel like, I had always felt like coding and programming sort of gave me like, as much as people don't think of it as being creative, like it always felt creative to me. I felt like I had like the tools to like go and build something real in the world, which was always exciting to me. But the moment that like AI for coding actually became feasible, it was like so much of the burden and the restrictions and the hurdles to like actually be a software engineer and go and build stuff just like kind of went away. And it was this moment for me where I was like, wow, I can like tackle 10x as difficult problems now using AI like 5 times faster than I could before. And that just continues to blow me away, and also just like get me excited as somebody who likes building things, that like people get to go and make more stuff in the world that they are excited about because of this technology. And it also still feels like so early. Like I'm still sort of experiencing that moment of awe in my life changing as we're living through the technology getting better, which is really interesting.
That's fascinating, because Gus and I think in season 2, we talk about this big shift where I think it was maybe 2 years ago now, there was, as you said, sort of this big change. And sounds like you really felt it and have benefited from it. And both of you, I'd love for you to tell more, like explain more about what that big shift really means.
Yeah, I think if you look at the history of personal computers, like every so often there is a revolution, right? And for that revolution to happen, you need the right technology and the right experiences. They need to come together. So I think we had one, for example, when computers came with a keyboard and a monitor, because until then people don't realize like you didn't just type stuff, like you had to use like, switches and punch cards, or suddenly like you can use this thing just as easily as a typewriter. There was that brought computers to every desk. Then you had a second revolution, which is the graphical user interfaces, where, until that point to edit an image, you had to go pixel by pixel and turn it on and off with your spacebar. And that was normal. If you ask people, how do you like build this, birthday card? That's it. That's how you do it. And then suddenly now you had a mouse and you had a graphical interface. You could draw things, and like that completely changed how you do things on your computer. Then there was another revolution, which was the touch screens, which suddenly now, like you can just touch and scroll and pinch and zoom and carry a computer in your pocket because you don't need a keyboard anymore. It's that simple, that easy. And I think we're watching the beginning of the next evolution. And I think this one is going to be bigger and more disruptive than all the others together. I think we're basically watching the beginning of the next industrial revolution. And with that, like companies will be born and companies will die, and completely new ways of doing business. And I think in a few years, we'll look back, and the same way I look back in all these other revolutions, and like, how could people use a computer like that way? Like that made no sense. I think we will see that again.
You talked about like the tangible things that each of these technological shifts went through. But in terms of AI, like, can you describe more about what that looks like in terms of like the before and the after?
There are many things we can explore. One is almost all software we use today is built on top of structured data. And what I mean by structured data is tables, right? Spreadsheets, tables, like where there are columns and rows. And so CRMs, ERPs, your travel booking thing, all these things, they sit on top of those tables. What we couldn't build was applications on top of unstructured data. And by unstructured data, I mean documents, emails, media, videos, right? You saw one of the examples in I/O that I still love is the person asked, like, what's my license plate? And Google looks at your photos and finds a photo of your license plate. That's your license plate right there. Being able to like look at your photos and treat them as a database is something that until very not long ago, like you just couldn't do it. That is one angle. The other angle is taking that and think about every industry from marketing to legal to like even Google. Think about how many manual processes we have today where somebody needs to open a document and read it and then figure out what it's all about and then route to somebody else to approve it. Now I can express those rules for the AI to do it. I can say, watch this folder in Google Drive, and when a document arrives, check it out. See, is that an invoice? Yeah. Okay, what is the price? Is it above blah? Okay, does it contain car parts? Okay, so this person needs to approve it. This like was impossible to automate before. So suddenly now you can do, like, there are cases where it's virtually impossible to, like, processes are very slow because you just can't do triage fast enough. Mm-hmm. And now you can do it. You can streamline that.
What has made that flow that you just described so interesting is you think about the world 5 years ago, if you wanted to automate that flow, maybe it was kind of possible, would have required like hundreds of thousands of dollars in capex of like machine learning engineers and back-end and like this entire, like literally an entire company to solve that one problem. And now you take a random person off the street who has no technical skill and they can articulate in plain English exactly what they want to have happen. And it's that person who can now solve that problem without, $1 million business behind them. And it's crazy to think of all of those use cases that are now becoming capable for the like non-developer user. And we talk about this a bunch because of the position of AI Studio and the topic around how we bring the next generation of people into the sort of quote unquote developer ecosystem who aren't developers today, who don't have technical abilities. And it's interesting that this technology is also catalyzing those people to come into the ecosystem, which is, I feel like, interesting. And I wonder, back to your analogies around other technological revolutions, if there was similar parallels. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there kind of was when you went from low-level programming languages to things like BASIC. Like my first programming language, I guess I learned Logo. Yes, kind of. But like BASIC was the language that I really like went deep first. And that language is basically kind of like writing English. Until then, like you had to, like it was really hard to express logic to a computer, right? So I think there was gradually we've been opening this how many people we can empower with these technologies.
So how do you balance that that ability to both learn and know what the tech is with actually making decisions about it, right? Because sometimes I feel like when you first start out as a developer, you're really into the code, you're really into building things. And as you move up and you start taking on more leadership opportunities, you tend to be more people focused as opposed to tech focused. And so I would love to hear a little bit about that evolution and how you stay connected to the tech. And also, now that you both have sort of this bigger picture vision, sort of how that informs the decisions that you make.
I was talking to Nate, who is the product lead for Kaggle, about exactly this topic, which is, the longer that you stay in a specifically product management roles, it feels like the more it seems like you're pulled away from, if it's a developer-facing product management role, like the actual technology, the community in some cases, and it's like a very natural thing that you have to fight. I think for me, it hasn't been super hard just because like it also feels like this is like a incredibly fun and exciting developer moment. So it's like I want to spend my time doing this, not because it's my job, because it's like the coolest technology in the world to build with right now. So it's easy to try to find the time. I also think for me, I think, Matt, you're in a different position. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. Like, I feel like I can't be effective unless I'm using the technology. Like I shouldn't have my job if I'm not spending time building with the Gemini API and using AI Studio every day. And so I feel like I haven't had to spend as much effort thinking about how to do it. And again, if the technology was different, maybe it would be harder, but it's just, it's so fun to play with. So
I have seen both of your calendars. And when do you find the
time? Okay, there's no reason to shame us for having.
That's no, but you're so busy. No. There's no shame at all. But it's more of an admiration of like, how do you, when and how? This is also, the podcast is also about sort of there's career advice and sort of a career angle to this as well. But how do you, you do have this sort of full-time job, both of you, where you're in meetings a lot of the times, but, and you're making important, connections and decisions. But when do you find time to work on that? Not to expose or anything, but, when do you find the time to, to play around with the technology or to build or to develop? Do you set time aside or, is it in your free time? Like how do you time manage?
Maybe my answer might be a little bit different than yours on that. But like, I think you have to decide for whatever job that you have, the Zoom level that you need to apply, right? And so in the early stages of my career, technology was everything for me. I was like, oh my God, this is such a new universe of things. I want to learn everything. I want to learn how every bit works, why this happens this way and that way, blah. And for many, many years, that was great. I had a great time and I felt good about going deep on that. Then at some point in my career, I don't know exactly at which point, I started to get interested about why big projects fail sometimes. And what leads to that failure? And very quickly I realized that the biggest disasters in the tech industry, they never happened because some developer could not reverse a binary tree on the whiteboard. That's never why, right? It has a lot more to do with people, strong bias, cognitive bias, right? And suddenly I was like, oh, okay, so I can't fix that by writing some JavaScript. That is a whole different kind of problem. And then I started to dive into that kind of problem and reading a lot about behavior economics, psychology, kind of the irony, but both my parents are psychologists, so they must laugh at that now a lot. So then I realized that, I started to become a different kind of professional, spending my time on different kinds of things. So today, when I look at my team, for example, my job has a lot more to do with making sure that Logan tells me what I need to do, right? And removing problems so Logan can do his job, and the rest of the team. I'm lucky to have like an amazing team that like they all tell me, they all empowered to tell me what I'm missing, what is wrong, right? And above, like there are some interesting books. There's a book called The Culture Code that talks a lot about what makes a high-performing team, right? And one of the things that are obvious there is psychological safety, right? I need my team to feel empowered to tell me, no, Matt, we think you're wrong, and here's why, right? And I will listen. Right? And we may disagree, but I will listen, right? And so that to me becomes, in other words, in order to do what I do, I need to leverage all these smart people around me because they will go deeper in ways that I don't have the time to go do anymore. And I'll digest what they tell me, and my decades of experience tells me the patterns, right? Of like what to identify there and what to do about it.
It's a very real tension. Like I don't have the magic formula yet.
And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your team and what you're doing. And sort of, Logan, you lead AI studios, and I'd love for our listeners to learn a little bit about what that is, your vision for, if you can share about sort of where you want to lead your team, and just love to hear a little bit more about your work.
Well, we're both fairly new, so one of my proudest achievements was hiring Logan and the whole team. By the way, the whole team is new. Some of them have been in Google in other roles. Some of them came from outside. I came to Google in February. When did you come? Was it
April 1st.
April 1st. So it's...
The joke was on me.
Yeah. So then we are a very small team we have a combination of PMs and UX people.
PMs, product managers, and user experience researchers. And we were blessed to inherit some really jewels of Google. One of them is Google Collaboratory, which is this incredibly popular notebook where people write Jupyter and all kinds of, every day I learn a little thing more about, I had a mental picture of the kind of people who use Collaboratory. Now I'm learning that's just one of the many types of people who use Collaboratory for different reasons. So that's one of the products that I help driving strategy for. Another one is Kaggle. That's I'm also blessed to help bringing these things together and kind of help them with a strategy. And I also inherited the newer products like AI Studio and the Gemini APIs. They all come into this group. So we are picking these different things that are they have different histories, they came from different places, and sort of bringing them together, say, okay, how do we make them more powerful because they are together and they're doing something together? And I think it's a wonderful kind of, if anything, I'm afraid of I don't want to break anything, because those things are so awesome. But they're amazing tools.
It feels like this interesting, special moment back to where we are in the evolution of this technology, where all of a sudden, two different product surface areas, two brand new ones, have this very real opportunity to come together, stuff that has existed for a long time and become this incredibly powerful thing. The number of people who are, contributing open source models on Kaggle right now. If you had asked 3 years ago, the Kaggle team probably wouldn't have expected this renaissance of open source AI models to be taking place. And it's this such a unique right place at the right time opportunity for, I think, all of the products that are in Mat's portfolio, which now we get to try to figure out how do you spin a cohesive, compelling vision when you put all those things together and go talk to the world's developers, which is, again, such a unique opportunity.
Yeah, and in terms of strategy, like there's so much I can go into details, but there are some basic principles that I love that we all as a team agree on them. One of them is basically just meeting developers where they are, right? Like there's a reason why somebody chose to use Collaboratory or somebody chose to use Kaggle or AI Studio. We need to respect those reasons, understand what these folks are trying to do, and grow those tools with them rather than like, okay, now I need to drag you somewhere else and make you start over because that's how we want you. Like that's our picture of success. And there is no such thing. I think we are happy no matter where you're coming from when we need to give you the tools you need to fulfill your workloads on that tool. And I think we'll do more of that. I think there is a lot of work we acknowledge we need to do in terms of simplifying our developer story. We hear this feedback loud and clear. When somebody's trying to figure out how to use Gemini, we have multiple products where we can use Gemini. Each one of them has their strengths and weaknesses. And we need to understand, okay, where you're coming from, what you're trying to do, how do I guide you better to the right place in a simpler way. So I think we'll do a lot of that as well.
So AI Studio seems to be one of those ways of guiding developers, at least sort of beginners developers, into using the Gemini API. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what AI Studio actually is.
The simple mental model is it's a really easy interface to test out Google's AI model. So you can sign in with your Google account. You can choose what model you want to use. We just released Gemini 1.5 Flash and 1.5 Pro at Google I/O, which also today just went live on. If folks aren't familiar with LMSys, it's like this leaderboard where you can see sort of human rankings of the models and how well they compare to other models. And both of those models just made it up onto the LMSys leaderboard today and are ranking incredibly well, which is super exciting. And like ultimately this like a quick meta comment, which is like people release benchmarks for models and it's like really hard as someone who is not like, even for me, like MMLU, you see that 4 letters put together and people say the model's got X, Y, and Z score on that. I'm like, I don't really know what that means. And like, I'm a developer and I care about AI a ton. And I think like broadly for the general public, like people don't know what those benchmarks mean either. And I think what is cool about the LMSys leaderboard is that it's like a human preference leaderboard. So it's like ultimately what humans are finding to be most useful and like most enjoyable to experience this technology, which is like a great way to sort of cut through a lot of technical jargon around evals and stuff like that. But again, yeah, so AI Studio is a way to sort of interface with the models. You can test them out. It's free, which is really exciting. And ultimately, it's a way to decide, are these the right models? Do they have the right features? Do they have the right trade-offs of these capabilities for you to go and build something with the Gemini API, which is what another part of the team is working on. We have a lot of work to do, but it's also, again, back to people handing us gems. The Google Labs team has incubated AI Studio and the Gemini API and done an incredible job of like laying the foundation for us to now take these products and run with them and get them in the hands of even more developers. And again, it just feels like a special time of someone handing us on like a silver platter all this amazing developer opportunity.
Thank you both for sharing. So speaking of exciting announcements and new things coming out, let's talk about Google I/O. What are some of your highlights? What did you love about it? Like for someone who's never been, like help us visualize it and like sense that we were there.
My favorite thing about I/O was just to meet a lot of people, right? People who are using those products had, stories to tell, what's doing well, what's not doing well, what they would do differently. And be able to having those, one of the reasons why a good part of my career, I like to be in roles like being a consultant is I like to be in front of the actual real problem where that's the time to try the technology in the real world and see what happens, right? And what's missing. So those conversations were, I met a bunch of people, for example, who build very, very popular collaboratory notebooks for educational reasons, and they have a whole bunch of needs. They're very different, again, very different than the average collaboratory developer who, they are building a notebook for themselves, not for an audience. So, learning that and getting to understand better what they want from this was one thing. And then, the kind of stuff that is happening, we saw a very early view of Project Astra, right? And like that kind of stuff, like it blows my mind.
What is it? So describe what Project Astra is.
Project Astra, like what everybody saw was in the videos, you saw this application running on a phone with this real-time video and audio happening where you could basically describe the world to this assistant and ask all kinds of questions about, did you see where I left my glasses? And it would remember because, a few seconds ago you moved the camera and the glasses were there, and say, yeah, and answer all kinds of, from programming questions to geographical questions to questions about objects on the table. And so like this ability to, taking Gemini to the next level in terms of assistance. One of the perks of this job is to be able to work with people from DeepMind, and those folks are just, incredible people. Like I would work with them for free, just don't tell anybody, but they're amazing.
Okay, so Project Astra was a highlight, and connecting and meeting different folks and sort of getting the personalized stories and the feedback in person.
Yeah.
What about you, Logan?
This was my first I.O. I sort of didn't know what to expect, honestly, going in. I think the actual atmosphere was like very exciting and playful. And it was like not like, I've been to a lot of developer conferences and a lot of them are just like walk around in a little main hallway, see a bunch of sponsors, watch people talk, sit there quietly, then go and talk to people. And this was like much more of truly an experience, which I appreciated. I think it was very different than a lot of other developer events that I'd gone to, which I appreciated. But ultimately, I think there was intent behind the way that I.O. was set up like that. And I think part of it is like highlighting, whether it's Google's culture or like the future of the world kind of that we want to see, which is like not just the like technology for technology's sake, but like also technology because it's empowering of humans and like bringing people together. And it was like that was kind of the vibe that I was picking up on as my first I.O. I was also like hosting a bunch of developers, so I didn't get to run around and check out as much stuff. But it was incredible to see affinity towards like certain developer assets that Google has, like Firebase, for example. Like during the keynotes, like people were getting really excited about the Firebase releases, which was really cool to see and learn more about those ecosystems and stuff like that. So it was a nice bringing together of all these different communities.
It's awesome the way that it's designed, because you have sort of the general Google keynote, then you have the developer keynote, and then you have all of these workshops and like breakout groups and discussion groups. And both of you were actually, well, you were there, Logan, but you were on a panel, a sort of a leadership panel. Matt, tell us a little bit about that.
That was awesome. It was a lot of fun, and it was an honor to sit, with a whole bunch of incredibly smart people, Jeff Dean, and I think it was a very open and honest conversation. People were basically, everybody's watching this space with a lot of questions about what's happening next, where we're heading to, how do we think about these problems, and we're all learning, right? I mean, like, the reality is this space is still changing so fast that we're all learning every day a new thing and new strategies, new ways of solving problems. So it's just really early stages of a longer thing.
And I think also seeing sort of the new things that come out, like, Project Astra, and sort of moving in that direction is also very exciting as well. So Project Astra was something that really stood out for you. What were some other announcements or sort of key moments, specifically within AI, that both of you sort of were very excited about or surprised by?
One of the things that we didn't talk much about, so we launched new Gemini models. And we're starting to talk more about multimodality, right? Until now, people have been very much like prompt, just text in, text out. And those are like, of course, there's plenty of applications for that. I'm more excited about the multimodality, because there is one basic lesson, in the history of computing, is that experiences where users have to type a lot are not necessarily great. Like, if you give me two options, one is click a button, the other one is write 10 paragraphs, I'll click a button because it's easier, right? That's why graphical interfaces came up. And now we are getting to a point where these models can assist with all of that. So, for example, one of the things that Gemini now does that's quite amazing is I can take a screenshot of my computer, I can give to it and say, find all the little controls on the screen, all the buttons, menus, labels, and give me the coordinates of where they are. And so what that does is it starts unlocking a whole bunch of other scenarios in terms of, I can not only reason over that screen, understand what's happening, but I can take actions, right? And so being able to take actions means that, again, we have to start rethinking how we traditionally write software and what design changes will happen. So I'll give a very basic example. Let's say Logan creates a startup that's a calendar app, right? And he launches the calendar app. The first problem he's going to have is how to bootstrap that with data, right? Because if a user signs up, okay, now my calendar is empty. And then everything I do, like I book movies or concert or a trip or whatever, I need that information to go into this calendar. And in the traditional software way, I would have to go to each one of those sites and convince them to put a little button to add it to Logan's calendar app. And they're not going to do it because it's a startup. They don't care about it. And now I can just say, take a look at that screen, whatever it's there, extract the calendar information in the way that this app can take. That entire friction disappeared because now this Gemini is capable of reason over like whatever pixels or chunk of text and say, create a structure out of this unstructured thing. So in a way, it's easier for startups to create new solutions. It's easier to integrate between software. It's easier to automate things on behalf of the user. Like a whole bunch of stuff unlocks just because you get this new little capability there, right? And that's just the early stages of something so much bigger.
Just to add on to this really briefly, in March of 2023, OpenAI released GPT-4 and demoed the vision capabilities of GPT-4. And I was sitting there with Greg, and it's this famous example of he drew a very, very simple design for a website, took a picture, the model then generated the code to actually do it. And I think that like kicked off in a lot of people, in my mind at least, like where we were going with this technology. Fast forward like 8 months later, I gave a talk at the AI Engineering Summit, and I'm sure I didn't actually coin this, but I said that 2024 was going to be the year of multimodal models. And I think finally actually seeing, like, it feels like all of that lead up, like the technology was like not actually, like people knew it was coming, but it wasn't actually there yet. And I think when 1.5 Flash was released, to Matt's point about like bounding boxes and some of these things, like it's actually now the moment that developers can take this technology and like really go and build production use cases. And I was just talking to someone earlier today about like the new substrate of startups that are finally actually going to be possible because 1.5 Flash like has the multimodal capabilities. It's like 10 times cheaper than any other model that's out there that can do those things. It's this like, and not to actually make it a product pitch, but it's like for me as somebody who wants to build stuff, it's like this incredible moment where the technology has finally caught up to, I think, like what people's aspirations were from 2 years ago. And it's, if you're building a startup and doing something cool with like vision, it's like, it's now possible. And I'm excited to see what some of those companies will actually end up building.
Yeah, it was fun. Like, the Flash is interesting because usually people like to do side-by-side comparisons of Gemini and what competitors have. And I've heard more than one person say Flash is its own category. Like there is no direct like the price point and the capabilities, like there's no exact match that goes there. So that was nice to hear that.
Yeah, which is also interesting. Back to the like LM-SIS, like evaluating models. Like this is why it's like one of the like toughest problems. And I have a lot of empathy for the LM-SIS people and other people who are trying to evaluate these models, is because like finding a way to articulate to people what those trade-offs are and also like how to balance those things is so interesting. It's like a real open science problem, essentially, is like how to make that more clear. Because I don't think it's like you look at rankings today by themselves and like the rankings are evaluating like a very specific thing and not taking into account the cost and not taking into account the latency. And like ultimately, those are the things that for people building with the technology, it really like the cost actually matters a lot. It's one of the main limitations to building with this technology. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
Awesome. Well, switching gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about some of the, there's this AI hype that's been going around with AI just really taking off and being a part of everybody's lives. One of the things I'm curious about is whether you're seeing like actual applications of things that really matter that this technology is enabling or is really doing?
People who have been working with me for years, like I have a reputation for, like I'm notorious for being very skeptical with hypes. And in the last few years, we had a bunch of hypes with different technologies. I was always very like, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the breakthrough here. And you see me talking about AI in a very different way. Like I don't usually talk about technologies that way. And I'm not saying there is no hype. There's a massive amount of hype in AI, for sure. And many companies I'm seeing, they're like, yeah, I'm not sure if you really have anything, right? But still, everything I say, I believe it. I think we are going to see a revolution. And you talk about saving lives, like deep mind building models that are better at understanding, making diagnoses of patients, right? The things that, one of the scenarios that I'm personally, it's close to my heart is in my home country, Brazil, the language they use in legal documents is not the same Portuguese that people speak. What this means is such a different, it's so formal that if you're not highly educated into that kind of language, you need a lawyer to just parse a document and explain to you what is that saying, because it's not readable. And so imagine how disempowering that is for the average citizen, that they read their own constitution or they sign a document and they cannot decipher what their rights are. And one of the things that blew my mind was being able to take a part of the Brazilian constitution, go to Gemini and say, explain this like I was 5 years old. And it translates that to I don't need somebody to explain that to me anymore. Right? So again, no matter which area you look at, which is healthcare or legal, I think the opportunity to actually help people is pretty much obviously there. I'm not saying of course there's hype, right? But you can filter and see those things and say that was not possible before.
Despite hype not being great in many ways, it actually feels like the hype is part of what is going to help make the technology actually more useful and help more people. And I say that because the order of magnitude of investment that it requires to build these models is so significant that I think in absence of the excitement across the industry in the world right now, you would just see less people making the investment. And I think there's I'm sure there's other technologies that are very similar to this, where the potential is incredible, but it just costs a lot of money to make happen. Part of the other angle of this is the delta between what the technology is actually capable of and the products that people have built to bring that technology to the world. And I think this is one, when I'm outside of all those meetings every week, what I sit back and reflect on and think about why this is such an incredibly important opportunity. But two, I think it again, hitting home on that narrative of this is an incredible moment for people who want to build stuff in the world, because you have this technology that is capable of so very much. And you have a lot of products, which for the most part, it just takes a long time to build a great product. It takes, a year and a half of being really thoughtful of how do you bring this in a unique way to someone and in a way that they're really going to enjoy. And I think, again, bridging that delta is part of the reason why we haven't seen the technology live up to what I actually think it's capable of.
Do you feel the same way?
I do feel the same way. The funny thing is that, like I said, that just the technology without the right experiences and the right problem application, it doesn't do. When touch screens came up, the company that first had mobile phones and tablets tried to copy the desktop experience into that. So you had scroll bars, you had it wasn't natural, right? And then somebody else say, hang on, you should be able to just touch the screen, do this, right? And now it's obvious, but it wasn't. And so combining those things, understanding the right problem, I was advising a bunch of startups. And they were like, no, we don't know how to think about applying AI into our, software. And I was like, imagine if I'm going to do some remodel in my house. There are two ways I can approach this. Way number one is I got this super new tool that I can't wait to use it. So I go walk around the house and whatever I can use it, I will use it, right? The result is going to be a complete mess, completely random, because I'm trying to use the tool no matter what. The other approach is say, let's write down what you want to achieve. You want more square footage, you want more sunlight exposure, you want to modernize it, you want to high value. What needs to be true for that to work? Okay, now let's select a bunch of tools. That shiny tool is part of it. It's not the whole thing, but it's part of it. And now let's intentionally apply these things to get there. You're going to get a much different result, right? And surprisingly, you see a lot of folks doing the first rather than second, right? Because they're like, I need to use this thing no matter what. That's not the right way to think about it. What is the end goal is a very important question. That doesn't change.
Mat, to be vulnerable for a second, I just got a power drill and I literally have been walking around my apartment thinking, what can I do with this? What needs to be power drilled in my apartment right now? I've got screws. I've got a power drill. This thing's charged up. I'm ready to go.
We all do it.
So I understand people's, the desire to take the technology and just stick it in a bunch of different places. But I completely agree with you. It's hard. It's hard to fight feeling when you're excited.
I'm having a little bit of an epiphany myself with this conversation, which is so helpful and so interesting. Is it comes down to, sometimes when we think about like technological evolutions or innovations or milestones, we think about like big things. But what I'm hearing is, when you say like, we want to solve problems, and in my mind, when I hear we need to solve problems, it's like, we need to cure cancer, we need to stop, global warming. And so, when I think about solving problems, it's like these big things. But what I'm hearing you talk about, and you as well, is it's the small problems that actually compounded make the big difference. And that's what this AI revolution is enabling, is these small things or these small problems that are solved by these solutions that are sort of will compound into eventually sort of much bigger things, but it has to start small.
Yeah, when you, one of the advice that I gave to some startups was, as you write your mission, every company should have a clear mission, right? And you look at Google, Microsoft, they all have these very well established, simple, easy to understand missions. Be careful not to name technologies as part of the mission. That's a big red flag, is when like, oh, my mission is to use technology blah to do blockchain, AI, whatever, metaverse. Like, don't, like step out of the technology. Like, what is it that you're actually doing, right? What problem you're solving? And because technologies change, right? And I think you can do a lot by solving small things. You can also do a lot by being clear about what is your end goal.
The other meta comment is AI as a tool. Like, ultimately, is AI going to be the thing to solve all of those problems? Probably not. Like, the humans are probably going to be the ones to solve them. But ultimately, if you can take some scientist who is currently spending, 20% of their time just like dealing with grant paperwork and sort of abstract that away. And now that, 20% is now unlocked to go figure out, cancer research. Like, to me, that is like such a net positive impact of the technology. And you compound that across like everyone who's trying to solve all of these problems. And it's like more time doing the things that matter and less time doing the things that you aren't interested in doing. And that feels like so central to the human experience, which is why I'm so optimistic about the outcome for AI.
So turning to a little bit of a trickier question is, I completely understand the value of sort of automation, and that's been sort of part of technological evolutions forever, and also, and saving time, right? But there's also something to be said for, in these like long processes, they're involving people. And when you automate these processes, you automate those people out. And so there is this concern over jobs and human interaction. And I'm sort of seeing that, that we're sort of relying on technology so much more to do things than we used to rely on people. And that's go back to like the steam engine or whatever big piece of technology, there is disruption that comes with it. But what are your thoughts on how this sort of, how this will not necessarily just disrupt jobs, but sort of how this is affecting the interaction that we're having with each other?
In the history of humankind, in every industrial revolution, there was always this argument that jobs would disappear, right? And people would be without what to do. And so far that has been pretty much the opposite. In every industrial revolution, that did not happen, and quite the opposite. Personally, I'm not excited when I see demos that just simply use AI to replace people. I feel like those are unimaginative, uninspiring, shallow, right? Like there are so many unsolved problems that really have nothing to do with replacing people that we can spend a couple of centuries there before we can even start worrying about replacing people or anything.
If someone's like end goal is how can I build this thing to replace some human flow, I actually think those end up and you can practically look at some of the tools that are out there right now, like just end up being the worst products. Like the products that are the most successful that are building with AI right now are products that are tools that are built for humans who are actually in that role. And you can look at, coding, for example, or customer service, for example, like the thing that is
accountants and data scientists, like helping sort through data and
100%. And like those are the most empowering and also like the most commercially successful things that are in existence today is like, how can we empower humans to do more of the work that they want to do and less of the work that they don't do? And ultimately, so much of the world is rate limited by the amount of intelligence that's out there. And like this technology provides some of that intelligence. Like I saw this quote once, which was, if everyone in the world knew how to code or had access to software, could like build software, like we'd solve all the world's problems in 10 years and then everyone would just retire and hang out. Obviously, that's an extremely optimistic and likely untrue statement. But I think there's some amount of truth in that, which is there's so many problems in the world to be solved that actually at the core software helps solve that are just not being solved today. And so many things that aren't even in many ways problems, but are like creative expressions. I think of my dad, for example, who is not a software, he doesn't know how to code or anything like that. He loves cars. And like the thing that, brings him a ton of joy is talking about how he wants a website that, given any day of the calendar, he can go and read about Carfax and like hear about all the cool stuff that's happened in history. And like the means for him to build that website is like either tons and tons and tons of like manual labor of him trying to figure that out, or, paying a software contractor $20,000 to go do it, or what. And now it's like, we're probably a couple of years away from him being able to just go into one of these tools and articulate what he really wants, and it sort of comes to life in his hand. And I think that is like one narrow example of like how many things can be created in the world that don't exist today, that like humans will always find something interesting to do because that's just who we are. I think the important piece, back to the question of like the displacement that's going to happen, like it is likely in every industrial revolution, like there is some amount of displacement in some area. And like, that's the role of the government. That's the role of people who have a stake in this process, is like, how can we make sure that the displacement like isn't negative? How can we make sure that we put the technology in the hands of people? How can we make sure that we're educating the world about how to use this technology? And it's also like one of the unique things about AI right now is actually the applications of education. It's like you can use this to now become a better writer or programmer or scientist or just like
teacher, helping you generate curriculum. And
100%. There's so many interesting applications of this technology, and it feels like it's going to be a force for good.
Yeah, education is like, I have a relative, she teaches literature, and she was telling me that she's seen the change where students are using more and more these large language models in her classes. And she was like, how do I teach literature moving forward? What does it even mean to teach these things anymore? The analogy I make is calculators didn't make you not have to learn math, right? Like you still need to understand what's happening there.
Right.
But now you have a tool that makes you more productive. Like it's not. So
your math ability can be taken to sort of a greater level because you have the calculator.
That's right. It's funny because we spend a lot of time showing how AI writes code, right? And I mean, super high value, it helps developers there. But if you ask any developer, like what part of their day they would rather see automated, is exactly the opposite of that. Is like the time it takes to take this long email thread with a customer reporting a bug, and now you have to go to Jira or GitHub and report. Like, I can actually take Gemini, say, take that whole email thread, extract the bug so I can put it on GitHub, right? It's like, oh my God, you just made me 10 times more productive because now I don't need to context switch anymore, right? So like all these things go into the, like how can I help you rather than how can I replace you?
How can we get developers out of meetings and writing code? Roger that. I would love that. I want to hear some predictions from Matt about what's going to happen with this technology in the next couple of years.
Oh,
Just to get him on the hook. We'll check back in 2 years.
What's going to happen in the next few years? I will sort of repeat. I used to work with this guy. His name is Jaron Lanier. He has his own Wikipedia page. He sort of invented virtual reality. He helped writing the script for Minority Report movie. He plays 1,000 musical instruments. He's a little bit smart. And he wrote a bunch of books that sort of predicted the future. Like in many ways, he predicted the challenges with society and social networks and a whole bunch. He's amazing. He's one of the perks of my career was being honored to work with some really amazing people, and that still happens today. So in one of his books, he says AI is going to get to a point where it will be able to interact with graphical user interfaces the way humans do. So, the way you use your computer, there's a screen, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. You understand what's going on and you operate all of that. And if you think about it, this is happening. When DeepMind people plug an AI into a video game, and all that thing can do is watch the pixels on the screen and then starts learning how to play the video game. And suddenly not only beats the video game, but it finds loopholes in the game that for decades no human ever found. It beats old Atari games in ways that no human ever figured out that was possible. So what he said was, he called that phenotropic computing. If you search around, you'll see some of his documents about it. And so he says when that happens, we will have to rethink how to design software. For example, we have to think do we even need APIs anymore? Because for a bunch of things, you kind of don't. I think that's one of the many examples where the irony of all of this is those of us who have been writing software for so many years, we have to kind of unlearn how to do things. It's learning how to ride a bicycle is kind of easy. Unlearning how to ride a bicycle is almost impossible because you have to let go that, how you solve problems and say, what if there's a complete new way of doing things? And I think that's my hand-wavy way of saying, God knows what it is. It's we're just starting to see what's going to change.
I love that.
What would you answer?
At a high level, I think the force of AI is going to be something, and this actually goes back to your last question is going to be something that brings people closer together. I think after a long day of using AI, not that the AI is itself going to be, which it could be a mechanism to bring people together, but I think spending time in experiences, and I think this also correlates with robotics in the future as well. There is going to be a ever increasing premium on humans and the value of what it means to be human and interacting with other humans. And I think again that bodes incredibly well for a future where we want what it means to be human to be valuable in society. And I think that is, prior to this technology, it was the intelligence of humans was what provided value for the world. And I think now it's a very that is actually changing because you can sort of get intelligence out of other things that are not human. So it'll be exciting in many ways. I'm sure it'll be weird in many ways as well. But I think something that continues to ring true in my own life right now is after a long day of using this technology or building something and work, the thing that still brings me joy and happiness is going and seeing my girlfriend, going and talking to my family, going and doing stuff with my friends in the real world. And that, I think is only going to get increasingly true as the technology itself becomes more and more capable and able to do more for you and things like that.
There is a book called Range. I forgot the author's name. It's one of my favorite books. And
David Epstein.
That's right. Yeah. And he debunks this idea that, if you want your child to be really good at something, a lot of people still believe that. I want my child to be a great musician. So at 4 years old, I'll make them choose one instrument, piano, and they're going to have to practice that relentlessly forever. And God forbid they change their minds and say now they want to play violin. No, it has to be one thing. It has And he shows examples after examples in history of people who became amazing at what they do, but they changed their minds really late and tried a bunch of stuff and figured out, and the more I revisit that book and think about where we are today, the more I think the future is for the generalists, is for people who really can connect the dots with the AI assisting them. And he gives actually one super interesting example about AI playing chess competitions. And then there was a point where they learned that doing a partnership between AI and humans allowed them to beat even other AI players, right? Because the human has the instinct and the AI has the brute force, right? So they partner them together and they can achieve even more. And I think that's a beautiful, sign that, this is about a partnership. This is not about replacement.
What a great way to end. This was such an amazing conversation. I learned so much. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. If you would like to learn more about our conversation or our guests, check out the links below. Please subscribe, and if you're feeling extra generous, give us a 5-star rating. We would love to hear from you, so leave us a comment. We'll read every one. Until next time, thank you for listening.